Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Holman, and I'm the Clinical Product Marketing Director here at Riverside Insights. I'd like to thank you for taking time today to join us for our webinar, Linking Assessment Data to Instructional Programming Using the WIIP. Today, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Tammy Stevens. Dr. Stevens is the Clinical Product Support and Training Manager here at Riverside Insights and is an educational diagnostician with decades of experience in the field of evaluation. She has a PhD in special education with an emphasis in assessment and is the author of numerous articles published in peer-reviewed journals focusing on topics including dyslexia and dysgraphia evaluations and the importance of considering exclusionary factors. We're excited to welcome you today to learn how the WIIP can help bridge your assessment data to instructional programming decisions. During the presentation, please leave any questions you may have in the Q&A box. A recording of today's presentation and certificate of attendance will be sent to all registrants by the end of next week or early this week or early next week. The recordings from our previous webinars can also be found on our website at info.riversideinsights.com/clinicalpd. And now, without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Stevens.
All right, thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to be here to share some information with you regarding the WIIP. And this is an add-on resource program. Can be used with the WJ products as well as the ECAD. So real excited to be here today. So this is our agenda for this hour together. We have a lot of information to go over. The first thing I'm going to do is just kind of start off with discussing the importance of linking assessment data to instructional programming. We are constantly assessing our kiddos, testing our kiddos, and we're taking that information really to gain insight into what types of interventions or instructional programming might be necessary to implement with our students. So we'll talk about what the law says regarding linking assessment data to instructional programming, etc. Then I'm going to move into the identifying the features of the WIIP program. You're going to find that the WIIP program is a very comprehensive program that will allow you not only to collect the data, necessary data for conducting your comprehensive assessment, but also it allows you a way to organize the data, analyze the data, and also provide you with some interpretation of the data results, as well as links the information to recommendations or interventions. So I'll take you through and show you the different features of the WIIP. And then we'll talk about the power of the WIIP, again, for the data collection, the assessment results, and instructional programming. So it's a very comprehensive solution for you to utilize with the WJ and ECAD products. And then at the end, if we have some time, we'll go through any questions that you might have. So feel free to drop questions in the chat or in the question box as we go through this presentation. So thinking about why do we assess students? Well, we assess students for many different reasons. Mainly, we want to really gain insight into their performance. We want to understand their current levels of functioning, understand what the student can do, what they have trouble doing, where they struggle. We want to really look at what their strengths and weaknesses are. But we don't stop there. We don't just collect the data, report the data. We want to take that data to the next level and use that data to really inform instruction, plan instruction for these individual students. So when we look at the federal regulations, they require us to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of students. And really, all students should have a comprehensive evaluation. But when we're talking today, we're going to talk about students that we suspect of having learning disabilities. That's going to be kind of my focus today. But the WIIP program can be used with all types of students. But that comprehensive evaluation requires that we use a variety of assessment tools and strategies to gather relevant functional, developmental, and academic information about the child. So a key word here is relevant. We want to make sure we're collecting meaningful data that we can use when making decisions about students. We also know that it's important and necessary per IDEA that we include information provided by the parent. And we use this information again to assist in determining whether that child has a disability and use it for planning individualized educational programs. Now, the WIIP, as you'll see, provides us with resources for the collection of a variety of assessment tools and strategies. And I'll talk a bit about that here in a second. But some of the vocabulary I kind of want us to kind of think about today is we know that all children are guaranteed free and appropriate public education, right? So we want to make sure that all kiddos have access to the general education curriculum. And when we have a student that is struggling within the general education curriculum, we need to assess those students to identify what the struggle, what's causing the struggle. We have to identify what the individual needs are of the student. We want to also look at if that student meets criteria for having a disability. We want to understand the impact of the disability on that student's involvement and progress in that general ed curriculum. So whether a child is receiving special education services or not, every child has the right to a free and appropriate public education. And we have to find a way and identify the ways in which we can ensure that that student is able to access or be involved in the general ed curriculum. And part of that involves us going through this assessment process so that, again, we can investigate where that student is struggling and determine whether they have a disability, what their individual needs are, and have a plan of action so that we can ensure involvement and progress in the general ed curriculum. So when we look at our IDEA, it provides us with a set of guidelines for identifying a student with a disability, and it specifies which conditions qualify a student for special education services. So again, it's that federal mandate or federal law that allows us to or ensures that each student has a free and appropriate public education. It ensures that every decision that's made regarding a student is individualized. And the ultimate goal is for students to really achieve their highest potential of function and independence within that general ed setting. So by us going through this assessment process, using the WJ, using the WIIP, looking at all the data together, we make these decisions and recommendations for the student. Now, as we go through the assessment process, at the very end of our assessment process, we're writing up our full individualized evaluation. So that's really the first step in us bringing together all of the data, the multiple sources of data, the variety of assessment tools and strategies, bringing it all together into our comprehensive report so that we can describe and explain the students' functioning. There's many purposes of a full individual evaluation. First of all, we want to review instructional interventions. We want to look at what types of instruction has the student had previously. How did that student respond to that instruction or those interventions? We also use the data collected as part of the assessment to develop a clear statement of the student's present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. And that PLAF statement is what we use to help kind of guide our proposed goals and objectives that are going to be incorporated into the IEP. Also, another purpose of the FIE is to determine why the student's not making adequate academic progress. Now, not only is that a purpose of the FIE, but it's also a purpose of our assessment process. We want to understand, we want to collect a variety of data sources to understand why the student's not making adequate academic progress. We also use the data to determine if that student meets eligibility criteria for a specific learning disability and or any other educational disabilities that we might suspect. And then finally, we take this data to generate an appropriate and effective plan to meet that student's educational needs. So when you think about your FIE, you think about this write-up, this report that basically describes everything that you've done within the assessment process. This FIE serves as the legal foundation of the IEP, right? So we should be using this data to really guide the development of the IEP. It serves as that legal foundation. So the more comprehensive the FIE, the stronger the IEP is going to be. And the better understanding that we're going to have of that student's strengths and weaknesses. We're going to have a more appropriate eligibility determination that's going to be based on not just scores, but on multiple sources of data, which is mandated by policy. And with that, we'll be better able to stand up in due process should we go to due process. So the data acquired and presented within the FIE should be the driver of that IEP. So when we look at the relationship between the evaluation data and the IEP, again, solid data from multiple sources create a strong foundation. We should have our evaluation data, our information that we pull in from our WJ, from our ECAD, all of our checklists, any information provided by the parent, by the teacher, etc. We should have that information help drive our PLAF statements, determine educational needs, establish the student's goals, and identify any accommodations that student might need, and then present those findings to the IEP committees, the ARD committees, to determine appropriate placement for that individual student. So when we think about comprehensive, we know that our assessment must be comprehensive in nature. And we have to think about, so with our assessment, using that data to write up that FIE, that full individual evaluation, we have to make sure that we include all areas of suspected disability and related needs within that FIE. So when we think about a comprehensive evaluation, we've got to ensure that the student's strengths and weaknesses have been clearly identified. And we should be looking at not only strengths and weaknesses within their academic profiles, we also want to look at strengths and weaknesses within their processing profiles and functional performance. We also need to make sure that those strengths and weaknesses have been supported by the convergence of multiple sources of data. So parent information, teacher information, classroom observations, testing results, background information, looking at grades, looking at other data that's been collected on the student over the years. We have to have multiple sources of data that converge in these areas that identify those strengths and weaknesses. And if there's any conflicting data, maybe there's an outlier there where some data point doesn't line up with what our preponderance of data tells us. If that occurs, we have to make sure that we address that and explain that in our reports as well. So when we're looking at the elements of the FIE, the other thing we have to do is make sure that we identify how the disability affects that student's access and progress in the general curriculum. And once we've identified what the impact that the disability has on the student's access and progress, then we have to identify what unique and individualized recommendations are included. So by taking the data that's been collected as part of the assessment, we're able to identify whether that child meets criteria having a disability, and if they do, how does that disability impact that student's access and progress in the general curriculum? Once we have that information, again, we have to determine what unique and individualized recommendations are included. I have an asterisk here beside this statement because this is information that we can pull from the WIIP program. As I go through and show you the different features of the WIIP, we're able to link students' performance directly to some recommendations, instructional recommendations that are directly linked to that student's performance on the WJ or on the ECAD. We also know that part of our evaluation, when we're looking at that comprehensive evaluation, we're looking at that FIE, we've got to have information from teachers. We have to have data about what types of interventions have been tried with the student. If the student has been in an RTI program, what types of interventions have been provided, and what was that student's rate of improvement, et cetera. We also need to have parent input. As I mentioned before, it's really important to get that input from the parents. We have to observe that student in the classroom. We have to have information from the nurse, information about students' vision, hearing, motor difficulties. And then school data needs to be incorporated as well. And that would include things like attendance, discipline reports, etc. Again, having the asterisks beside the teacher information, parent information, observations, these are some checklists. We have some forms within the WIIP that's going to help you collect the data around teacher concerns, parent concerns, and we also have a classroom observation report that I'll show you that can be utilized. And then when we're looking at academics, again, we want to understand the student's performance in math, reading, writing, science, social studies. So we want to understand their current functioning level in relation to expected functioning level. And we want to go beyond just presenting the grades and or the standardized scores. So again, pulling in these additional data points regarding work samples, progress monitoring, looking at, again, the classroom observations, any formative assessment results that's been done, IEP progress reports, curriculum-based measures, et cetera. So we're going to pull all of that data in to conduct that comprehensive evaluation in the area of academics. And we also have to look at social, emotional, behavioral functioning. So again, looking at classroom reports, observations of the student in the classroom, comparing the student to other peers in the classroom to see if the student that we're assessing is engaging in typical types of interactions versus atypical types of behavior interactions. We also, again, want to have that family input. We want to have information about office referrals and discipline, and also attendance. There's also, when we're talking about functional information, we also want to look at students' communication and language skills. And again, within the WIIP, we have those observation reports. There's information on the reports regarding language skills, et cetera, that can be incorporated into the assessment. And then finally, as far as functional, looking at students' motor abilities, their independent functioning, and assistive technology needs. Again, a lot of that information is going to be acquired through the family report, the teacher reports, student self-reports. The WIIP does have a student self-report. It's always important that we remember students need to be interviewed or questioned about their own experiences. They can give us great insight into what they are good at, what they're struggling with, et cetera. So we can pull that data in as well. And then again, in-school observations, et cetera. And then with our physical development, looking at the students' physical development and any other unique characteristics with regards to their interests or their participation in home and community. Again, a lot of that information is going to be pulled in from parent reports, from any previous comprehensive evaluations that's been done, as well as school nurse reports or the self-report from the student. So understanding what a comprehensive evaluation is and understanding the importance of looking at students' performance through different lenses, pulling in not just our standard score or formal testing results, but also pulling in the checklist data, we can use the WIIP to assist us in each step of the process. So the WIIP allows us to link those assessment results to instructional programming in a streamlined process. So one of the things that there was a study that was done back a few years ago. A group of school psychologists were asked what their #1 barriers were to effective report writing. And the top 3 involved time. The evaluators were saying that they didn't have enough time to really sit down and write these comprehensive reports. Another was excessive caseloads. Because of the excessive caseloads and all the other responsibilities, again, they felt limited in their amount of time that they had to write these reports. And then the third barrier that was introduced or was indicated was that the lack of actual data that was collected. So again, with the WIIP, it allows us to kind of streamline the process. It gives you a resource as the evaluator to really collect the data, interpret the data, and also link the data to instructional individualized recommendations. So within the WIIP, I'm going to go through and just kind of show you some of the major features of the WIIP, and we're going to start off with the comprehensive and dyslexia reports. So when you use the WJ products or the ECAD, you get a score report. So that's something that comes along with your purchase of the kit. But if you want to go deeper and get a more comprehensive report, you would have to use the WIIP program. So it provides you with a more comprehensive report, but it also has this dyslexia report that I'll highlight as well to show you. So when we're looking at the WIIP, again, it's designed to help examiners like yourselves create a comprehensive psychological and educational report. It really helps facilitate the report writing to increase your focus on interpretation and program planning. And again, it allows you to link the WJ results to evidence-based and formative interventions. It provides you with criterion reference checklists that you can share with parents, with teachers. There's also the direct observation report, the self-report, etc., that can be utilized and incorporated into the comprehensive report. So it was really created to meet practice needs, linking assessment results with instructional interventions. And it really was created to help you adhere to those legal and regulatory mandates for that are designed to improve educational outcomes. Okay, so when we're looking at gen ed and we're looking at special ed, we have a need for evidence-based interventions or recommendations to be included. So when we're using the WIIP, it supports a widely used comprehensive assessment. So again, it's available for the WJ COG, it's available for the oral language, the achievement, and also the ECAD. And again, it provides evidence-based interventions based on that individual student's needs. It also helps you as the evaluator, helps facilitate data-based decision-making. So it's really, like I said, it's a resource that allow you to kind of streamline your assessment process as well as your report writing process. So it is provided through the Riverside Score platform. There's the web-based entry via Riverside Score, and I'm going to show you a few kind of screenshots of the program itself. There's also over 500 interventions and accommodations that are included in the WIIP database. And you have different options that you can choose to include, more interpretive details for tests and clusters. And again, it includes this dyslexia and ECAD report options as well. So again, in the system, we have comprehensive report options. There's qualitative checklists. We have hundreds of formative and evidence-based interventions. We have interventions for oral reading errors. We have formative interventions for 5 achievement tests, which I'll show you as well. Let's take a look first at the comprehensive report. So this comprehensive report is, again, much more detailed than the score report that comes with the WJ products. The comprehensive report provides you interpretive overview, narrative of performances on the tests and clusters administered. And if you select the Appendix A, there's a more detailed interpretation of clusters and tests report option. Also, you can, if selected, the checklist, the evidence-based and formative interventions can be included within the report. And then the score report is also included within the body of the report. So you still get access to the score report, but with the WIIP, it's much more in-depth narrative associated with the results. So when we're looking at the comprehensive report, there's 2 options for basis of interpretation. So we have the option of looking at students' performance through peer comparison, and that's where we're looking at standard score performance. You also have the unique option of looking at students' performance through functioning or proficiency. And that's where we're looking at the relative proficiency index-based interpretation. A lot of times the RPI gives us much more insight into the student's functioning in the classroom. Sometimes the standard score interpretation might not give us as much detail as the proficiency, that RPI piece of data. And we're going to have we're going to offer a future webinar talking specifically about the importance of looking at students' performance through multiple lenses, but especially ensuring that you're utilizing the RPI within your interpretations, because the RPI, the relative proficiency index score, is kind of like a hidden jewel, if you will, within the WJ products. Again, it provides us with much more detail that, in my opinion, is much more relevant to instructional programming, because it is providing you with information regarding students' proficiency versus just looking at students' performance through a standard score, which again is an ordinal measure that looks at, basically tells you that student's place in line. We want to go deeper and understand their functioning on specific skills. We have to look at students' proficiency. So you can run the comprehensive report through either lens. And I'm going to give you an example of a little excerpt from each of those options. So if we're looking at a standard score option, then we would see something like this. John's overall intellectual ability is as measured by the WJ4 general intellectual ability. Standard score 73 is in the low range of others his age. There is a 68% probability that his true GIA score would be included in the range of standard scores from 69 to 77. So it's basically kind of just a description of the standard score, where that standard score falls out in relation to peers. Now, if we want to also go a little deeper, this is an example of a standard score option overview of the WJ4 cog measure. So this is an example of something that would be provided on that comprehensive report. Among the WJ4 cognitive measures, John's standard scores are within the superior range for 1 test, letter pattern matching, and within the high average range for 1 test, verbal attention. John's scores are within the average range for 2 tests. His scores are within the low range for 2 tests, and then his performance is somewhat lower than expected for his age level on 1 test, which is oral vocabulary. So It just kind of lays it out in a narrative form with regards to where his standard score, where his performance falls in relation to standard scores. If we want to look at the proficiency option, again, through the lens of the relative proficiency index, again, proficiency option is going to tell us more about the student's functioning. John's overall intellectual ability is measured by the WJ4 General Intellectual Ability Cluster is limited when compared to others of his age. Here's another in-depth example of an excerpt for the proficiency option. Among the WJ4 cognitive measures, John's proficiency level is within the very advanced range for one test, the letter pattern matching, and within the advanced range for one test, verbal attention. John's proficiency is within the average range on two tests, and then they go through and talk about the limited range, etc. So again, you as the evaluator can make a decision as to how you want to run the report. Do you want to look at the student's performance through the peer comparison or with the standard score, or do you want to look at it through an RPI, that relative proficiency index? Here's another example with letter pattern matching, standard score of 127. His letter pattern matching standard scores within the superior range. And then we have the RPI that was also obtained for this student of 100/90. And what that tells us is that his speed of orthographic processing is very advanced. He will probably find it extremely easy to succeed on age-level tasks requiring rapid discrimination among letter patterns. So not only does the RPI tell us about functioning, that students functioning on those skills, it also tells us, predicts how well that student would perform on similar tasks in the classroom. So again, if you run the option for the Appendix A, there's a detailed interpretation of clusters and tests that will be included in the report. So you can see that on your handout. So the comprehensive report, again, it allows you to choose a standard score or proficiency for the basis of interpretation, but you as the evaluator retain responsibility and control over the content of the report and the interpretation. You can run the reports through Word, PDF, or a web-based format. And then again, if you want a more detailed score interpretation, then you can include the test Appendix A. For that, interventions can be included, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a second. And then one or more checklists can also be included in the report itself. So let's take a look at the checklists that are available. And we often get evaluators as we're doing presentations, they're often on the lookout for comprehensive checklists to incorporate into their assessment process. So I'm going to show you some of the checklists that are included in the WIIP that will help you collect and organize and document important information about the examinee. It also highlights and reinforces the importance of qualitative information in the evaluation process. So while we know our standard scores, our formal testing results are a very important component of our assessments, we also know from what policy states requiring that we must use a variety of assessment tools and strategies, that we should be incorporating checklists, these types of qualitative information into our assessments as well. So within the WIIP, there are 6 checklists that you can make copies of and share with the referral teams, with the parents, with the teachers, with the student themselves, etc. So there's a reason for referral checklist. There's a parent checklist for school age and preschool students. There's a teacher checklist, again, for school age and preschool. There's a classroom behavior observation form that you can use. There's a self-report checklist for adolescent and adult students. There's a writing evaluation scale. So if you're in your area where you're suspecting a disability, maybe dysgraphia, or in the area of writing, you do have access to the writing evaluation scale. And then there's also the dyslexia evaluation checklist for the parent and the teacher. There's also some additional checklists that are included on the test record. So all 3 batteries, including the oral language, the COG, the achievement, and the ECAD, has test session observation checklists to capture qualitative data for overall administration of each of those batteries. And the achievement tests and the standard battery of the WJ 1 through 11 include qualitative observation checklists as well. It's always important when we're assessing our kiddos that we're keeping track of this qualitative information so that we can incorporate that into our interpretation of the students' results as well. So real quick, the reason for referral checklist, again, it can be included as a brief introductory session or section on that comprehensive report. And it has the name of the person who refers the student, the relation to the examinee, the primary reason for referral, and then some common questions and additional specifics that are also included. Again, can be completed before online entry using a copy of the checklist, or if you're having to meet with the referral team, and you can ask these questions and enter the results, the answers directly into the online platform of Riverside Score. Checklists are located under Add a Test Record section. So if your district purchases the WIIP, it will come up as a drop-down option under under that Add a Test Record section. This is just an example of a sample information. So once you've completed that checklist and incorporated it into the online scoring platform, this will show up on that comprehensive report. So it'll add that reason for referral piece as well. Here's just kind of a snapshot of the first page of the referral checklist. So it asks who initiated the referral, what is the relationship with the student. Here's like primary reason for referral, what is the area of suspected learning disability, observed learning problems, suspected any health problems, any motivational problems, discipline, etc. So again, this can be printed out and completed and then entered into the WIIP program, or it can be included directly in the platform. There's the checklist for the parent, again, school age. It's intended to be used by the parents or caregivers, and it includes 8 different parts. So it's got several sections here that allows you to gain insight into developmental history of the student, current temperament and mood, looking at behaviors, and then any behavior problems that might be seen at home. So again, when we're thinking about our comprehensiveness, we're thinking about pulling in developmental history, we're bringing in information about behaviors, etc. We can incorporate the parent checklist for that information as well. And this is just a snapshot of that parent checklist. Here's an example of how you can go in and actually insert the responses within Riverside Score so that these responses will be included in that comprehensive report. And then this is just a sample of what it might look like in the parents report. So it's got information here. John lives with his mother, one other child, age 1, lives in the home, etc. Information about health, physical fitness, etc. And then teacher checklists for school age. There's 6 parts to this. We can get information regarding oral language and achievement, current level of instruction, information about the student's temperament and mood, any current classroom functioning information that would be helpful and relevant, primary concerns of the teacher, and then any problem behaviors that the teacher sees in the classroom. So again, another piece of data that's necessary as we conduct our comprehensive evaluation of the student. And again, another snapshot of how you can enter these ratings within Riverside Score that will then show up in that comprehensive report as narrative of that teacher's responses. And then the classroom behavior observation form, it allows you to integrate direct observations into the comprehensive report. You can include 1 or 2 classroom observations in the comprehensive report. We always recommend that students are observed in the classroom where the student's struggling, as well as in the classroom where the student has intact ability, so that we can compare students' performance across those different environments. So there's 3 parts included in this observation form. Part 1 is a time sampling form where we can compare student to a typical peer. We can compare that referred student to a typical peer to see how that student's performing and what their behaviors look like. There's also a part 2, which looks at the impact of problem behaviors on learning in classroom environment. And then there's a part 3 that reviews the primary problem behavior. So identify primary problem and provide additional information. So there are 3 parts to this particular observation form. This is that first part, time sampling behavior, where you can keep track of students on task, off task behaviors. Any problem behaviors that you might see during that observation as well can be documented on the form. And again, this can be integrated into the program and be included in the comprehensive report. And then for the self-report checklist for the adolescent and adult, again, it's a modification of the parent checklist, that school age checklist, but it's intended for use by the adolescent or adult who's capable of reading and understanding the questions. There's 5 different parts to this checklist: current home and health status, self-description of attitudes, self-reporting of abilities and skills, school history, and then recollections of early schooling. So again, you're able to pull in some pretty comprehensive information about students' health, about whether or not they have sustained a head injury, or if they have had seizures, et cetera. And it goes through collecting information about how what that student's previous schooling looked like, et cetera. And then again, it's incorporated. If you put it into the program, WIIIP program, you're able to incorporate it into that comprehensive report. Finally, the writing evaluation scale. This provides a narrative interpretation of the examinee's writing skills. So it supplements test results and provides more detail on the individual's writing competency. And it allows us to identify instructional goals, and it can assist in monitoring progress as well. So you're able to take this and basically rate the student's handwriting, their spelling, punctuation, capitalization, vocabulary, syntax, etc. So again, another resource for you to have to gain additional insight with regards to the student's writing abilities. And again, that can be incorporated into the comprehensive report as well. And you have copies of all of these, so you can kind of go back and look at what that verbiage looks like as well. And then finally, another feature in addition to the checklist are the evidence-based interventions. And we have the interventions that have research that supports the effectiveness of the interventions. And again, the system has evidence-based interventions for the WJ achievement, oral language, cognitive, ECAD. It includes both cognitive and achievement areas. Again, it's written in narrative style for reports. It's based on the individual's performance on the tests themselves, and it's generated when performance falls within limited or lower range. These are the different areas, the academic areas where we offer evidence-based interventions as well. So reading, math, written language, and then also academic knowledge. So the next couple slides just kind of provide you with an example of what an evidence-based intervention might look like for, this one's a math facts fluency. You see they give you the RPI, the student's very low with the regards to proficiency. A 0 over 90 is really the lowest that you can get. Standard score of 50. Based off of that student's performance, the system will generate recommendations of interventions that you as the evaluator can pick and choose to include in the report. So you can see here, John needs interactive and intensive practice to master his math facts. And it goes on to give you specifics regarding where that focus should be when it comes to the math facts fluency. And then here's an example of one of the interventions for passage comprehension. Again, you have your RPI, your standard score information up here. And then there's a pretty in-depth recommendation, evidence-based intervention that's recommended as well, how to kind of meet the needs of the student who's really struggling with passage comprehension. And then we also have the evidence-based interventions for cognitive, again, looking at the CHC, looking at comprehensive knowledge, fluid reasoning, all of those broad ability areas are addressed within the system. So again, depending on how that student performs on one of those cluster areas, the system will provide us with recommendations for those areas where that student's struggling. So you can see this is a comprehension knowledge, GC, RPI of 1 over 90, less than 40 standard score. When presenting new information, it may be necessary to help John associate the key points with his prior knowledge or personal experiences. It's just one of those recommendations. And then for fluid reasoning, we can see here RPI of 76 over 90, which means when, same age peers are performing at 90% proficiency on fluid reasoning tasks, this student is performing at 76% proficiency. Student has a 90 standard score. So based off of that student's performance, here's the evidence-based intervention that's recommended for John. So teach John to analyze number patterns that require multiplying by a specific number to obtain the next number in the sequence. And again, it goes through and tells you step by step what needs to happen so that the teacher can pull it directly from the report for easy implementation. And then oral expression, when we're talking about the test of oral language, again, we have evidence-based interventions for oral expression, listening comp, phonetic coding, phonological awareness, and then also speed of lexical access. So again, depending on how that student performed, this particular student on the oral language cluster scored a standard score of 76 with a 54 over 90. And so this particular evidence-based intervention popped up as an option. Reading lessons allowed to Sierra, either individually or as part of a small group, is a way to identify words she does not understand. So then it goes through again to give you more in-depth guidance as to what the teacher can do to help Sierra with her oral language skills. And then finally, there's also formative interventions. And these interventions are designed to improve day-to-day teaching and meet the specific needs of the student. And we're going to have a follow-up webinar where we're going to focus only on the formative interventions. But it is available for 5 tests in the WJ Test of Achievement: letter word ID, applied problems, spelling, calculation, and word attack. And so if you also tally up the error types for test 8, that oral reading, a formative intervention for each error type is also available. So again, when we're looking at including formative interventions, when you go into Riverside Score and you go into the achievement test record, instead of just entering that raw score, you can actually click on items to enter item level data. So if you click on that items tab, then you're going to see this pop up. And then you can go in and enter in ones and zeros for each of the items. And then you hit done. It's going to tally up your raw score, but it's also going, the system's also going to look at and be able to analyze which of those items the student struggled with. And then based off of that struggle, it's going to be able to provide you with some recommendations with regards to formative interventions. So it provides that intervention for teaching specific skills or concepts. So these are, this is an example of one of the formative interventions for letter word identification, and that's teaching closed open syllables. And again, you notice here that the interventions are very specific, and they provide you with a lot of information so that, again, the teacher can take this, pull it out, and utilize it. So they know exactly what is expected, what they need to do with the student. And then here's one for applied problems, teaching simple multiplication word problems here. So again, very specific to that need for that particular student. And then finally, we'll finish up with the dyslexia report. So with the dyslexia report, this offers a framework using various WJ4 clusters and tests to assist in the organization of the assessment data and also in the determination of dyslexia. It's important for us to remember that this is a resource. It's a tool for evaluators to utilize. It does not diagnose dyslexia. It provides you with the information you need as an evaluator to make that decision. So when we're looking at the dyslexia report, there's different elements that are included. So it provides, again, that organizational framework for assessing the characteristics of dyslexia. It also provides you with a dyslexia score profile and interpretive overviews with comparisons. And then you can also incorporate those parent checklists, teacher checklists into the report as well. So in addition to the checklist that I've already showed you, there's also a dyslexia evaluation checklist for the parent, one for the teacher. There, again, we have that self-report checklist, classroom behavior observation, and then the writing evaluation scales. So those three I've already showed you, but the dyslexia evaluation checklists are unique to the dyslexia report. The dyslexia report, the dyslexia, if you will, a profile in the WIIIP was based off of some work that myself, Dr. Carla Proctor, and Dr. Nancy Mather did. And if you go onto Riverside Score, go onto the platform under resources, you can find this assessment services bulletin number 6. And it provides you with some guidance on how to incorporate the WJs into your assessment of dyslexia. And there's a great tool in the back of it that was used to kind of guide and lay out and organize this particular component of the WIIIP program. So we identify the primary reading and spelling difficulties, and you can see the different tests that are incorporated into testing of those primary reading and spelling difficulties. So these are pulled again from your WJ products. This is that score, that primary profile, that dyslexia profile of scores. So these are those primary, you can see here, primary reading and writing difficulties. Here's your letter sound. Here's your basic reading skills. It tells you which test from the achievement that you would want to give. You've got your standard score columns here, your RPI, and any comments you want to add as well. So this is kind of, again, the guide that we used when developing the the dyslexia report. Also, we know we identify secondary reading and writing difficulties. So some of those secondary reading and writing difficulties include reading comp, written expression, and then vocabulary and academic knowledge. And you can see for each of these areas which tests that you can pull in to measure those. And again, in that dyslexia profile of scores report, it's going to lay out your secondary reading and writing difficulties as well. So again, for reading comprehension, these are the tests from achievement that can be incorporated. Written expression, you can incorporate these tests from the WJ achievement. And then cognitive characteristics of dyslexia. So looking at unexpectedness or looking at students' performance in areas that do not require reading is an important component of identifying dyslexia. We're going to look at, whether that student has average to above average overall cognitive functioning, and then oral language and math skills may be intact, because again, oral language and math doesn't require that reading component. So there's a list of relative cognitive abilities that you can choose from when you're looking at possible contributing factors. So explaining and identifying which of those areas of, is it the phonological awareness component of cognition that's impacting the student's ability to read. Is it the orthographic awareness? Is there a memory component, rapid naming, or and/or processing speed? So we've included all of those as well. So again, just remembering that the goals of the dyslexia profile report is not to diagnose dyslexia, but to provide you with a framework to discuss the primary and secondary characteristics of the student. Again, looking beyond the standard score and integrating valuable home and school qualitative information using those checklists is also important. And it does align with the 6 assessment services bulletin framework that I showed you, that can be pulled down from the WJ Riverside Score platform, accessed under resources. And it makes conceptualization easier and more targeted. So you do have different components. I've identified the dyslexia report, the 2 checklists, and then any additional considerations. There's an additional considerations piece, just to kind of, for the evaluator to kind of think through as you're making that determination, incorporating everything together to make your decision about the student, whether they meet criteria or not. These are a list of, there's a list of required and optional test clusters that have to be given if you want to run the dyslexia report. So we have those listed here for you as well. These are the required tests that have to be administered and put into the system to run that dyslexia report. Again, if you have the WIIIP, it will come up as a report type dyslexia report, and then you're able to go in, and again, you can add any test records to include those observation forms, checklists, etc., so that you can manually input any of that data so that it will be incorporated into the comprehensive report. Then you've got your interventions here, and what will happen here is when you run the report, you'll click in the interventions box and a group of interventions will pop up, and then you can pick and choose which of those interventions you want to include in the comprehensive report. If you're missing tests or clusters to run that dyslexia report, there's an error message that'll pop up to tell you, remind you that there's certain tests that are required. So you can go online also under the Riverside Score platform, and they do have a quick guide for running the report as well. under the resources tab. So if you haven't been on Riverside Score and looked at those resources, go in there and take a look. There's a lot of great resources available to help kind of streamline your process and provide you with guidance with regards to utilizing the platform. And again, your dyslexia evaluation checklist for the parent and for the teacher will show up in the drop down under the test record / checklist field. And then again, you'll be able to enter this information directly into the platform so that it can be incorporated into the report itself. And then, as I mentioned, there are other resources available, additional considerations in dyslexia assessment that you can download as well, that provides you with a little additional guidance for interpreting the student's performance. And here's a snapshot of the resources area of Riverside Score. And you can see there's quick reference guides there. If you need information on how to create a comprehensive report or create a dyslexia report, these are PDFs that you can download and save. There's a report and score interpretation guides that are there as well. There's a copy of the technical manual that's there. There's also information about the WIIIP, which we talked about today, kind of a digital walkthrough, as well as additional checklists, manuals, etc., that can be incorporated into your assessment. So at the beginning of every dyslexia report, they're going to have the purpose of the report and the dyslexia definition. So we've got the International Dyslexia Association definition included in that as well. And then again, pulling in your checklist from the parent and the teacher, that information will also be included in the reports and be embedded there. And then you'll get your table of scores that will you'll be able to analyze, to look at students' performance, not only through the scores, standard scores, but also looking at the RPI and the descriptor associated with that proficiency level. And then the last part is the interpretation part, and this is where you can see if there's a check mark, it indicates that the primary reading and spelling skill is significantly lower than the ability measure used as a predictor. And so you can kind of get a glance at how that student performed in relation to their reading and spelling in relation to the GFGC composite, broad oral language composite, and or the academic knowledge composite. So a lot of information included in today's training, and I know we're at time, but I just wanted to kind of remind you that, you know, this is a great tool, if you don't have it already, that help kind of facilitate your assessment and your report writing process. Allows you to, as the professional, to retain control over and responsibility of the report and the interventions. And it gives you that narrative information to kind of incorporate it into your own report. And again, remembering that there is that dyslexia report that's available as well. So really hope that you find value in incorporating the WIIIP into your WJ assessment and report writing practice, and great way for you to kind of streamline the process and cut some time out as you are assessing these kiddos, interpreting their information, and incorporating it into instructional programming for the student. This is my contact information, so if you have any additional questions that you want to reach out, weren't able to get to, we'll probably take a look at those questions and get back to you individually if we weren't able to answer all of those as folks were monitoring the chat. I want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the information. Such a powerful tool for evaluators. And thank you, attendees, for joining us today. And we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.